Okay. Hello, everybody, and I hope you're doing well and doing well on your finals in particular, and ready to once again kind of pivot your focus back to the extended essay for the end of the year. We have one major task to add to make sure that you are well set up to move into the summer, ready to do research independently on your research question, and that is your detailed outline. So, for this detailed outline, we've spoken a little bit about this in our extended essay sessions during core, but I wanted to review this and make sure that everyone kind of got the same presentation on this before turning this over to you to work on. Okay, so this is version 1 of the extended essay outline, and this is for if you are doing research only. So there's two ways that you can conduct the extended essay. One of them is through research using primary sources, secondary sources, data from other studies, et cetera, but through research. So you find it and you record it and you use it for your analysis and use it for answering your question. There is a second option that I'm going to get to in a moment, which is for group 4 in particular, if you are incorporating an experiment or any kind of personal data collection as well, kind of falls into this other category where you you develop your own research methods for your experiment or data collection and apply it through this other model. There's no one way to do the outline. There's no two ways to do the outline. So these two are simply helpful tools that I've developed to help you create an outline that will be helpful to you. If it's not helpful to you, then it is not a good outline. There are an infinite number of ways that you can do this. And so I encourage you, if something is not working for your topic, to make that alteration. Okay, so if you don't have to follow this rigidly or dogmatically, this is something that you can adjust to your needs. All right, so the first one for research only follows what I call the Peel method for research. So we start with your introduction here. I've recommended about 300 words. Again, this does not need to be followed to a T. If it is a little over, a little under, that's fine. This is intended to guide you to target that 4,000 word total once it's all put together. So if you go a little under for any of these sections, just know that that gives you a little bit more to play with in another section later on, or maybe earlier. And so you have this running ledger, or this running account of how many words you've used. You have 4,000 words to spend. You want to spend it all. You don't want to leave a lot left over, and so you want to spend your whole bank of words here. And so get as close to this as you can, but don't fret if it is a little more or a little less. That's going to fluctuate based on the needs of your essay. Once you've gone through and gone and looked at the introduction and then your plan of investigation, which I'll show you an example of here in a moment, that's when you get into the meat of your outline. So these are your main points. And again, using this Peel format, what I have set up here is 3 main points. Okay, main point 1, main point 2, and main point 3. Oops, put that back. Okay, so each of these main points is going to be about 1,000 words with this setup. Now, if you have 4 points that you need to make, if you have a different number here, again, that just means that you'll have fewer words per point. And there is no magic answer here. Fewer main points means you get to go into more depth for each one, and there's advantages and disadvantages. More main points means you get more perspectives, but less depth for each point. So we don't want to go too few. You don't want to have just 1 or 2 main points, but you also don't want to have like 5 or 6 main points, right? So you have some flexibility with how you set that up, but don't go too little or too much. There is a sweet spot of say 3 to 5, depending on what you do. So let's see. So the Peel strategy starts with making your main point and then providing evidence, explaining what that evidence means for your point, and then linking this evidence and explanation to your research and to other main points. So this link can link any direction, but typically you want to make sure that you're at the very least stopping to remind the reader and the examiner what your research question is and how this helps to support it. But you can also link to other points. You can look forward, you can look back, you can connect to the previous point, or you can use it to kind of foreshadow, say, a point that's coming up. Okay, so point, evidence, explanation, link, and you do that about 3 times. Again, this is not a rule, but if you do it about 3 times, that means you have about 250 words per kind of piece of evidence to explain it and link it, and then another 250 words to evaluate that. So what does all of this mean together? And how do we look at the strengths and weaknesses of how this point will support your research question? Again, I have an example to show in just a moment. But if you do it the way that I have set up, this chunks it down into 250 word segments. So it makes it easier to kind of plan and approach that way to get to 1,000 words for each of your main points. You repeat that a few times. And your conclusion I've recommended for 400 words, and I do not want you to worry about your conclusion at this point. You do not have to include a conclusion in your outline. Okay, I've left it here because this outline isn't just what you turn in on June 16th and don't think about again. This is a living document. And so your conclusion will get filled in. This will be helpful for you to use over the summer. You will add to this. You will edit this. This will be something that you continue to use alongside your research as you get your draft moving. Okay, so I have it in there for you to use. It is not required. It is not part of what's due in 2 weeks. Okay, so let's look at an example of this. Okay, as a history person, I'm most able to give examples with history that will be helpful. And even if you're not a history topic, it allows you to see the structure here. So the research question I've chosen is a relatively common one that I've seen a lot, one that a lot of students have used, and that is, to what extent did German tactical mistakes from 1942 to 1943 affect the outcome of the Battle of Stalingrad? This is actually one of the examples from the IB repository from their website that I linked you to earlier in the year. So one of the history examples from the IB right here. And I've unpacked this a little bit more based on ways that I've taught this in the past. And so with the research question in mind, I give a little bit of a background here. Again, you can see how I bullet point it. I've given 2 to 3 bullet points. They are complete thoughts. You'll notice that they have detailed information, dates, but they are not necessarily everything that's going to make it into the final draft. Okay, and then same down here below your research question. So I give some context here. The Battle of Stalingrad was a major turning point. Had Germany been successful, then the USSR would have been cut off from its industrial production and oil. And then the result of it was a total flip of that, where the German army was completely defeated, or at least their 6th Army, and was the beginning of a broader retreat that lasted for the next couple of years. Right, so this is summarizing the significance of the question and building up to it. And now I want to also talk about what is the current understanding in the field about this. So this is obviously history, but this is going to be the same strategy that you use regardless. So whatever your research question is, what is the current discussion or debate surrounding this topic in the field? So for this, as a history question, historians like to debate and are kind of divided on whether it was the mistakes of the Germans that led to their undoing, or if it just kind of hastened their downfall, if ultimately they were going to lose because of the advantages of the Soviet Union at that time. Historians generally agree that tactical mistakes were made, right? So this isn't controversial. So I'm explaining to the reader or to the examiner that I understand which parts are and are not controversial. So it's not controversial that mistakes were made. The controversy is about, and the debate is about, whether or not this led to the outcome of a Soviet victory in this one battle. So the historical debate that continues is whether or not these mistakes were more impactful than the Soviets' defensive strategies and subsequent counteroffensive. And then I go on and I discuss why this is significant, how weighing in on this will be helpful. Again, you'll have access to this, so I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time reading this to you, but this beginning stuff, I really want to just make sure that you see that regardless of your topic, you're setting the stage and you're putting your essay in the context of your discipline. So you're explaining through all the background research that you've already done, that you've learned from your annotated bibliography, and so on. What is what knowledge surrounding this is important to know. Okay, it might not be directly answering your question, but it puts your question in the context of your field. And this is part of what the extended essay is. You're showing that you, as the writer, understand these kind of bigger picture things and where your question fits in there. Okay, so having done that, you'll then make your plan and highlight your plan. You can see that I used some bullet points here. So this essay will investigate the German strategy of lightning warfare, also known as blitzkrieg, as applied to the Battle of Stalingrad by determining what it was, how it was nearly successful, the tactical mistakes that caused it to falter, and ultimately how the Soviet strategies were able to defend and counter it. And then I have some ideas here, again, bullet point, brainstorm, but complete thought and detailed information here about how I might find that. So I'll use secondary sources that are going to help me examine what blitzkrieg was and how and why it was developed. I'll look at secondary sources as well to figure out examples of its success. So, for example, looking at how it was used in France to knock them out of the war. I'll also try to analyze some maps. I know that Infobase has a lot of maps, so I'm going to start there and see what I can find. You can get that through our Dwight library. And I'm also going to use down here for further primary source documents. I'm going to check out Gale Primary Resource Collection in the Dwight database, but also look at Library of Congress, which is a big repository from the US government. Okay, and I'm going to try to find any communications between leaders or any speeches made by leaders, anything that's indicating their strategy or their responses to different developments. So I'm going to really try to find the words, the words from the leaders themselves and what they were thinking that led to certain decisions or how they reacted to developments. Okay, so that's it, and that is it's a lot of thought. This is a lot of brain work, even though it's not a lot of word count here. But once I have this, then I'm really set up for success for the rest of it, because you'll notice now that I go down here, I'm mostly just taking what I already have here and then organizing it, right? So here are my three main points I've already kind of put here. What is blitzkrieg and how is it nearly successful? I've fleshed that out a little into my first main point. The German strategy of blitzkrieg or lightning warfare had led to German success in Operation Barbarossa in 1941 and was nearly successful at the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942 to 1943. So looking at, again, what it was, I'll find evidence about what it was and how it was used. And again, notice here, I'm not giving full explanations. I'm recommending, remember, 250 words here. This isn't 250 words. Okay, I'm just indicating what I'm going to do. I'm not expecting you to have all of your research done and all of your explanations ready to go. So this is an outline. It's detailed because of what we've just looked at here, and especially in this planning phase. But when you get down here to this table, just make sure that your points are clear, right? You indicate what kind of evidence you're going to have or what that evidence should be about. But again, you don't have to have all of your evidence yet. That's going to come into focus as you continue to research and write. And then what your explanation will be. How will you provide an explanation, or what will it be an explanation of? All of this is just helping to keep the focus on answering your question. You're not doing the writing yet. And then how might I link this either back to the research question? So why does this matter for whether or not German strategies or German tactics or Germans made mistakes, tactical mistakes in the Battle of Stalingrad? right? So how does this relate back to the idea of German mistakes being a deciding factor? And here it's really saying, this far from being a detriment, Blitzkrieg had been used by the Germans specifically to overcome numerically larger opponents, which the USSR was, right? And doing so while limiting their own losses. So you can see the rationale. And now I go to the second bit. I want to find evidence of how Blitzkrieg was successfully applied in the early phases of Operation Barbarossa. So here, how it was used by Germany, say, in France prior to that, but then Operation Barbarossa is the initial invasion of the USSR. So how was Blitzkrieg not just generally effective, but specifically effective earlier, the year before, in the USSR, in the Soviet Union? So it would make sense that they would continue to use it because they'd had success. Okay, so again, just kind of hashing that out a little bit. And the last thing I just want to go over together is this evaluation part. So hopefully the evaluation makes sense with this example here. But when you evaluate your point, I'm evaluating this, that Blitzkrieg led to success and was nearly successful in Stalingrad. Now I'm going to evaluate that. I'm going to say, well, wait a minute. Okay. It wasn't just all strengths. Blitzkrieg was not something that made the German army invincible. It was just something that highlighted how they were strong, right? This is something that everyone tries to do in war. Be strong where you're strong and kind of don't let your enemies get at your weaknesses. But these strategies themselves, every benefit that they have, they also offer up a vulnerability. So because it was so fast, one of the problems of Blitzkrieg was that it allowed pockets of resistance to form behind. They didn't really shore up their defenses. They just raced right through, blasted through an area, and then kept moving on and didn't control the area fully. So this is something that happened continuously. They didn't fully control that region, and pockets of resistance would then form behind them, which was a big problem. The strategy, because it was so reliant on speed, also meant that it needed good weather, which Russia famously doesn't have. And then it was a strategy designed to force an unprepared enemy to surrender quickly. But by this point in the war, it's hard to call the USSR unprepared or caught off guard. And they're not looking for a surrender. Germany was hoping to negotiate a surrender rather than perhaps a total surrender. They wanted territory. They wanted their living space. They did not want a prolonged war. And so the strategy fell apart because of the preparedness and willingness to continue fighting of the USSR. So here I've evaluated this. I've spent all of this looking at how successful Blitzkrieg was for the Germans, how it played to their strengths, but ultimately it did have weaknesses, and we're going to see those come out. And I'm going to use that to transition to my next point here. Each of these weaknesses ultimately plays out in a war against the USSR, and continuing with the Blitzkrieg strategy despite changing conditions led to tactical errors by the German forces. So now I've come back to my research question. Okay, so again, I'm going to stop it here, stop this review of this example here. But I wanted you to hear my thoughts on why I put things where I did. There's more. I've filled out all three of these points. And just again, a reminder that your conclusion, you do not need to do for this. And I have that very clearly bolded and underlined in the sample that you don't need to do this. Okay. If you choose version 2, a lot of it will be the same, especially at the beginning, but just understand that you'll have a slightly different purpose for how you're writing. You're not necessarily following the Peel format so much as you are trying to demonstrate what experimental methods you used and why, how you set them up, and to make the experiment repeatable by someone else, and all those things that you typically would do in a lab report. So it's really meshing an outline of an essay with what you might do in a lab report and kind of putting those two things together. So that's over here, but same idea. You don't need to write everything, put your ideas down, and really focus on these beginning parts, your introduction and plan of the investigation, and how you're going to go about setting up things. And this can change. You're not married to your outline. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about, I'm going to wrap this up here in just a few minutes, is how to use this in conjunction with Weava. So I've made a new Weava page here. You can see this is a new folder that I have in here for my spoof topic of the Battle of Stalingrad. And I found a few new resources here. This is through through Infobase here. Right. So I have some articles here, and you can see I have one open that I've been highlighting from. But I go back to Weava. We looked at this together, but just a reminder that you can sort by website, so you can see all these different websites, or you can sort by color. Now, what I've done is I've gone through and I've used different colors for different purposes. Okay, so I wrote this down on my own so that I wouldn't forget. And that's one thing that would be helpful for you to do as well, or to make a note for yourself in Weava. You could also do that. But essentially, the pink I've chosen for my general statistics. Orange, those represent the Soviet strategies. Yellow highlights represent, the orange represents Soviet advantages. Yellow represents Soviet strategies. Green represents German advantages, and blue represents German strategies. And I've chosen these as just a way to help kind of see how I can support my main points. So this is how these go back and forth. And it's not like you do one and you're done and then you start the other. So it's not like you have your research over here and you're going to just directly use this to start your outline, because your outline is actually going to inform how you organize your research. And then this will go back and forth. So you should have both of these things at the same time. Whenever you're researching, make sure that you have both Weava and your outline open. Okay, that's going to be a really effective pairing in making sure that you document the ideas that you find and allow yourself to kind of use them in a more powerful way, to let one inform the other and go in this circle round and around between them, ultimately using them to write your essay. All right, so back to Weava. Remember too, you can expand these when you click on them. Okay, so I'm going to expand all of these. So now essentially what I'm looking at is all of the pertinent information. So again, pink showing me helpful information regarding statistics that I might want to include to support some of my points. So number of forces, number of casualties. Some of these include damage done to civilian populations, homes, hospitals, factories. Some of it has to do with number of weapons like tanks or air support. So, generally finding some helpful things for strategy, for statistics. But then I also want to make sure, because again, I'm based on my main points of the essay, right? If I go back here, I need to be looking overall at strategy. So either Blitzkrieg, all these are strategy. Blitzkrieg and how it was successful, that's strategy. Tactical mistakes, that's failures of strategy, but still strategy. And then how the Soviet strategies could counter and defend and counter against Blitzkrieg. So what was going on and what gave either side the advantage at any point in time, I've decided to highlight. And I have all of this here. Okay. So, and you can toggle back and forth between this. I've also included a map of Stalingrad here. So remember that you can upload into Weava anything that is not, say, web-based. So if you have just a website, that highlighter tool runs in your extensions as long as you have it turned on. But there's a few reasons why it might be helpful to just upload a PDF into this list, such as if it's more visual than text resource. Another reason you might want to download or rather upload a PDF into this list, and I have this open, here it is. So some of the sources you might find, like Gale, for example, Gale has its own highlighting tool. And sometimes that overrides the Weava extension. So if I go to highlight here, it's going to give me this internal highlighting tool. This isn't Weava here. This is through Gale. So if I were to highlight it here, that's not going into my Weava. It doesn't pop up here. Okay, so I'm going to delete this. And what I'm actually going to do is instead I'm going to download this. Okay. And then I'm going to be able to upload it into my page here. And then from here, I can highlight. Okay. And now it gives me my Weava highlights. So I can go down to the Battle of Stalingrad and talk about, here it looks like the Soviets springing a trap. So I'm going to highlight this section. That is a Soviet strategy. So I'm going to highlight that yellow. And I go back now and I see I have a yellow highlight here. And it saves it. And it will allow me to organize it as well. If I go into this, so now it pops up here as well, whether it's a web page or a PDF. So hopefully this was helpful. Please let me know if you have questions, but again, your task is by June 16th, and this is going to be linked to Turnitin. You are going to complete an outline. You're going to complete version 1, version 2, or some some outline inspired by one or both of these. Okay, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it should be similar because it needs to have these components. Okay, so if you change the order, change a couple things here and there, that's okay to make it your own, but it should still have generally the different components that are going to be needed. You fill it in like I've done here. You can color code it like I have. You don't have to. This was more for me to be able to show you quickly, with 3 different colors, that I have 3 different pieces of evidence to support each point, right? And then you'll submit that by the 16th. Again, no conclusion in what you're turning in, no conclusion. You want the ideas of what you're doing. You're not expected to include all of your evidence. You're just going to indicate what evidence you will find, or what you're expecting it to look like, and how you expect it to align with your main point and research question. Okay, and really focus on this beginning part where you put this into context. So your research question will be here in its current form, and then all the rest of this is putting it into context and explaining how you're going to go about it. If you do a good job, especially with this part here, if you're really thorough here, then that's going to make this really quick to fill in, really already in a lot of ways completed, and you just have to put it here and expand a little bit on some of your ideas. Okay, so that's it. Please let me know if you have questions over email. I know this is not quite a full lesson, but I wanted to make sure that while you're in finals and we didn't have a regular schedule, I still wanted to be able to touch base and present some of your tasks clearly and